Thank you very much. Namaskar. Gives me great pleasure to be here this afternoon, to be part of a brainstorming, as I call it, on a subject that is very close to my heart. I know we have a mixed audience, and I will take a liberty of switching languages from time to time because I think there are certain things best said in a given language rather than trying to translate it awfully and making a mess of it at the end of it. Reminds me of one of our political leaders, and this is an actual thing, no names, but some time back when Mrs. Gandhi was the Prime Minister, and one of our leaders was in Delhi for a normal, occasional baatcheet with her. So he said, after the normal namaste, this, that, she very casually asked, and these questions are not really meant to be questions, they're just opening gambits, as they say. So she said, हाँ तो आपके महाराष्ट्र में कैसे हो रहा है, क्या चल रहा है? So this gentleman said that, बाकी तो सब ठीक है, लेकिन जो प्रॉब्लम मैं आपको बताने जा रहा हूँ, उसने हमारे नाक में 9 कर दिए. She said, what? हमारे नाक में 9 कर दिए. Now, for the life of her, she couldn't figure out what this man was trying to say. So she said, अच्छा, कोई बात नहीं, हम बात कर लेंगे. So what I'm saying is that sometimes forcible translations can land you up in quite a mess. So allow me to, I think we've finally succeeded. That was just a filler, actually. It's got nothing to do with what I'm going to say. I have a lot to say, and I'm also conscious of the fact that all of you are reasonably knowledgeable about what we are here about. So if it's all right with you, I'll rush through certain issues, and if you like, we can come back to them during question and answers. Or if I do manage to save some time, then I can come back to them. But I've been asked also to cover certain aspects of what the army was able to do in the Kashmir Valley, and that might present a perspective to you which may be in the present context of some value, because understanding Pakistan has to be factored through the Kashmir issue as well. So willy-nilly, whether you like it or not, there is that either you can call it the Kashmir factor in the Indo-Pak relations or the Pakistan factor in the affairs of Kashmir. I'm going to touch upon these 3 broad areas, and the first 2 I'm going to try and rush through, except where, if it's all right, they can interject in between and ask a question on the spot. It's okay with me if it's all right with the organizers. I need your permission to, or should we leave the questions till the end? Yeah, if there is something that, as I'm going along, let's say I'm saying something about Pakistan or the Pakistan Army and so on, and if you feel that there is something you need to ask immediately, just shoot out your hand or just stand up. I may not know your name, but we'll take the question as we go along. Perhaps that will cover a little more ground than we intend to. Okay, on to Pakistan. Pakistan is fortunate in certain respects. Many respects, actually. Let me just give you 1 or 2 examples. Here's one country that became independent without fighting for it. You name one person in the freedom struggle who fought for the independence of Pakistan. One person. Don't talk about Jinnah. We are talking about freedom fighters. There are people who were born with a silver spoon in their mouth. Those are different. That's Jinnah. Don't even mention Sir Syed, who formed the Muslim League in Aligarh. Okay, if that question is intriguing, let me ask you another question. Where were all the major Muslim movements started? And which part of Pakistan? None. So much so that even Lahore was the capital of Ranjit Singh. So here's a country that was born suddenly out of nowhere without fighting for it. So although it has, geographically, it is situated in a place which is very significant, and as Dr. Paranspe was talking about, you know, the location, they're blessed with the location. So are we, but in certain respects they are vis-a-vis the current situation. In the long run, whether how important that location will be, only time will tell. There was hardly any ideology except theology. So frankly, in fact, if you let me rush through a few points quickly, just to make a point to convince you. Rest you can read on that thing. Do you know how the Muhajir movement started? You know, when Pakistan became a nation, suddenly within the first few months, they realized that they don't have a civil service. So the earlier Indian civil service, the ICS, had a number of Indian officers, but most of them were either those who were non-Muslims or those Muslims who chose to live in India. Hardly anybody went to Pakistan. So they didn't have even the basic framework to start an administrative service like the IAS. So what they did was they pleaded with these people, particularly in UP, from UP, Bihar, where there's a large Muslim population, and there were a number of very well-read, renowned people in the ICS. They were requested, please come, help us build Pakistan. So they said, fair enough, and they obviously also saw an opportunity where accelerated 2-3 level up promotions were to be taken. So the number of them went. And to cut a long story short, they set up the Pakistani administrative service. 2 generations later, as the people who are born in Israel are called Samras. So similarly, there is no name for people who are born in Pakistan and now risen as pure Pakistanis, because the generations gone by were Indians at one point, as you know. So the pure Pakistani generation, when it came up, they suddenly started despising these fellows and said, after all, ये है कहाँ? ये कहाँ से आए? ये तो हिंदुस्तान से आए हैं. ये यहाँ क्या कर रहे हैं? That's how the term Muhajirs came. Suddenly they were despised, they were being denied their rightful promotions, places, and respect. And largely, that gave rise to this Muhajir movement, and that's why Altaf Hussain started the MQM, who of course was duly exiled and now lives in the UK. But what I'm saying is that this is how the country came about. All that they probably had was some concept of a national flag. Beyond that, there was nothing. And with little other than theology, it really didn't have any glue to hold it together. It is, whereas the Indian leadership was preparing itself for the responsibility that is going to be thrust on them sometime or the other. Soon, in the future, they didn't know the date. So there was a preparation, there was a whole thought of how this country is going to be, whether it's going to be a socialist country, whether it's going to be a republic, so on and so forth. Number of these things were already thought through. Our national flag went through a number of designs, as you know, starting from the flag that was raised by Madame Kama and so on and so forth. So that was the beginning of this country. May I have the next slide, please? It is therefore never reconciled to the existence of India to begin with. this so-called two-nation theory, let's not get into it, but the so-called two-nation theory, they haven't reconciled to this, and also not reconciled to Kashmir being part of India. I'm not going to get into whys and wherefores of that, but suffice to say that. But Kashmir seems to be the only rallying point for Pakistan, on whose shout people can gather around the flag. Otherwise, you can see what kind of turbulence there is forever. Basically, out of the provinces of Pakistan, 4 major provinces, if you include northern areas, POK of course has its own constitution, so whether they like it or not, they can't include that as a province. But northern areas being administered from Islamabad, even if you say that's another province, only 2 provinces count, Sindh and Punjab. And you'll find that everybody else doesn't count much. In any case, the old Northwest Frontier Province had its own problem. They had their tribal laws and tribal rules. So they say, you leave us alone and we'll do fine. Then there was the problem with the Durand line and the Pakhtun nationalism and so on. Let's not get into all that. But the point is, only these 2 provinces. Lahore was the cultural capital, Karachi was the economic capital. And as long as there was equilibrium between them, things were all right. The only fly in the ointment was the Pakistani army, because it had nothing to do with either. They had their own agenda. The Pakistani military is wrong to say, but Pakistani army calls the shots. Next slide, please. Time and again, one has found, is there a column mic? I don't like to hide behind the roster. Can you hear me otherwise? You see okay. Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me? No. Says it's on. All right. It's okay? All right. You can hear me at the back? Great. Okay, where was I? Like I said, a number of times I've had the occasion to interact with Pakistani officers, having been part of this track 2 diplomacy or whatever you want to call it. And that generation, which is today, of course, they're all retired. Musharraf was the last one of that generation, 1971 war. Musharraf was a youngster. But that generation they're still licking the wounds of 1971. And every once in a while, you can see from the way they talk to you, that comes up. They will never mention 71, but you know whatever they are saying, where that is coming from. So that's one thing, and that uska badla jo hai, wo uski aage ki 4 generations lene ke liye tayar hai. Where nobody's asked them whether they are ready or they want to. And increasingly, the new generations really don't want it. But the Pakistani army's new generation are being indoctrinated कि उस चीज़ का बदला ज़रूर लेना है. That's how, if you see, it is now decided on this long-drawn strategy of 1,000 cuts. This strategy, Brigadier Yusuf's book, you must have read, a book called The Bear Trap. Anyone read it? Yeah, okay. In Bear Trap, Brigadier Yusuf actually clearly lays down how a Pakistani brigade was actually operating inside Afghanistan, masquerading as Mujahideen. So don't fool yourself that it was the Afghan fighters and so on and so forth. 80% of that was Pakistani army. They were wearing shalwar kameez instead of their normal uniform and fighting as Mujahideen. In fact, the Pakistani army has been doing this kind of mercenary work for a very long time. You're aware that there was a Pakistani brigade in Saudi Arabia protecting the royal family, because the royal family had were feeling threatened by their own kith and kin around the palace. So that's another story by itself, but be that as it may, that was their insurance for their own safety, the Saudi family. And in return, Pakistan got all the goodies, all the money and everything that, also Wahhabism. Everything was then given to Pakistan in consideration of that. Talking of 1971 and the strategy, actually Pakistani army guys are very good at planning. They're very bold planners. If you study the plans of 1947, 1965, and to an extent even 71, you'll realize that the plans were extremely well laid out, bold. But the problem is they're terrible executioners, which is damn good for us. In our case, we are good at both. May not be terrific planners, but we are very good planners, as 1971 has shown us, and we are very, very good executioners. So that's why we score over them. The problem with 1,000 cuts was that how this whole idea came was, they said, अगर हम सोवियत यूनियन जैसी महाशक्ति को शिकस्त दे सकते हैं, we can defeat a superpower like Soviet Union and forcing them to withdraw from Afghanistan. India क्या चीज़ है? इनको तो हम ऐसे खदेड़ देंगे. I'll talk about that superiority complex a little later again. So, they said that all this time we've been doing it all wrong. 47 or 48, 47, 48, 65, 71. There's no point in doing a direct war with India. We have to defeat this large country by 1,000 cuts. As we have done with the Soviet Union. एक बहुत बड़ी गलती खा गए इसमें. वो गलती ये थी कि वहाँ वो सोवियत से फाइट कर रहे थे, यहाँ इंडियन आर्मी से फाइट कर रहे हैं. It's not only a question of, getting a hand clap. Understand, the Soviets didn't have the heart in it. They were not fighting for their soil. They were there because they were ordered to come and fight. And soldiers, being soldiers, they fought to the best of, but morale and that little extra that it takes to defend your land just wasn't there. Whereas that is the raison d'etre for the Indian Army. So that was a huge mistake, which they thought was a minor mistake or minor difference. Didn't quite work. In fact, I said I'll talk about the superiority complex and arrogance. You see, the only thing that Pakistan had strong in their country in the initial few years was the army. The army leadership, being shrewd, quickly saw this opportunity, took the initiative and seized power, which they have not left even till today. You can have any number of prime ministers and any number of cabinets and so on and so forth and ministers, but the real power is with the army, make no mistakes. Where else in the world would you find the chief of army staff ringing up the prime minister, who was Benazir Bhutto at that time, to say, Prime Minister, I would like you to come to bid farewell to the chief of a foreign army who was here on a visit and is leaving. And you would imagine that this chief must have been either, the American army chief or someone. UAE. The chief of UAE was going back after a visit, and the army chief says, Prime Minister, you better be there to say farewell to him. Can you ever imagine a thing like this happening in India? No way. No way. Not because of anything else, but the democracy and the rule of law is seeped deep into our bones. The army in Pakistan is a superior power, not under any constitution but its own. That is, you will have to ask them what it is. They also have, the army has a policy of create, control, and cut down. I'll give you two examples. What they do is, they will prop up leadership either within the army or outside the army, either through ISI or through anyone. And then, to make sure that that particular entity that they create does not get too big for its boots, they will cut down its powers. If it doesn't listen to them, then they'll create another entity as a competitor to the first one. I'll give you two examples. One within Pakistan, one within India. They initially created, well, let me first start with the Indian example because chronologically that's how it happened. JKLF, initially, the JKLF leadership went across to Pakistan to ask for help. We'll cover that a little later. And when they found that the Pakistanis had their own agenda, JKLF said, sorry, if your support is welcome, but don't ask us to do your bidding. So when after 2 or 3 meetings, they realized that JKLF is adamant on their own agenda and they're not going to do what we ask them to do, they created Hizbul Mujahideen. Well, they didn't create as such, but they supported Hizbul Mujahideen. The first task given to Hizbul Mujahideen was to finish JKLF. Leave alone everything else to the Indian state and the insurgency. No, first task was finish JKLF, which they promptly did. So the idea was to create a rival. When Hizbul Mujahideen, after a period of time, was not being as effective because they were not getting recruits, there was disillusionment in the Kashmiri youth about Pakistan and about Azadi, which we will touch upon. Then, they created Lashkar-e-Taiba. And Lashkar-e-Taiba's thing was, कि इन काफरों को जाके आप सिखाओ. They used to call these people kafirs, mind you. Second-class citizens. Even the Kashmiris who used to go across for training were treated as second-class citizens, as cattle, literally as cattle. They would be dumped in an accommodation, told what to do, when to get up, when to do training, when to eat. These guys were miserable, the Hizbul people. In any case, that was part of the disillusionment that took place. When Lashkar, at one point, started getting too strong, because you see, initially Lashkar was being completely helped by the Pakistani army, including funding, weapons, training, you name it, including launching. They were being launched right through the Pakistani posts, not even a separate launch pad. After some time, when they started telling Lashkar what to do, Lashkar in the meantime, they also come from the same stock, so they are as ambitious. वहाँ तो, you know, बेटा बाप को नहीं मानता है, as you've seen all the history of these sultanates. To capture the throne, the son was quite prepared to do away with the father and whatever, or his brothers. So the fact, Lashkar started making contacts with the likes of Al-Qaeda and other groups outside, including the Saudis. So once they found that they are independent in terms of their funding, they started showing two fingers to the army leadership. On the 12th of January 2001, I beg your pardon, 2002, Musharraf made a major speech, if you recall. Operation Parakram had just started. After the attack on the Indian Parliament on 13 December 2001, 2 days later, Operation Parakram was launched by our country and mobilization was ordered. Pakistan was taken completely by surprise by this kind of a reaction, and so Musharraf was on the back foot. And under those conditions, on the 12th of January next year, that is 2002, he made a speech in which he actually put his foot in his mouth. But not many people noticed it. He said, from now onwards, Pakistani soil will never be used for militant activities against India. De facto admitting that thus far it was being used. Whereas the official stance of the Pakistani government was, no, these are freedom fighters, they are doing on their own, we don't have anything to do with them. They did that in Garware as well. But that's another story. What I'm saying is, when Lashkar started showing two fingers, after this talk, 2 days later, Musharraf went to Muzaffarabad and spoke to the Lashkar leadership. Army intelligence has details of this, in which he said, ये तो मुझे कहना पड़ता है पूरे दुनिया के सामने, लेकिन आप लोग बेफिक्र रहिए, हमारा सपोर्ट जो है वो कायम रहेगा. Lashkar realized that this is only a man who has already been hit a couple of times. He's trying to save face. So they started doing their own thing. To cut Lashkar to size, they created Jaish-e-Mohammed. Jaish was already in existence, but the official support from ISI came in the wake of Lashkar trying to be a little independent and saying that, okay, we don't need you, we don't need weapons from you, we don't need your, even your posts for launch pads, we'll have our own launch pads. Because they had that kind of confidence and a little, ambition of their own. What I'm saying is this is their policy, this is what they do. Remember this for the future. That's why I included it here. Next, please. This is something which I'm going to spend some time on. You must be aware, but I'm going to run through a few slides just to give you a sort of a refresher on the status of various things in Kashmir. As you know, there are 3 regions in the state, that is Jammu region, Kashmir, the valley, and Ladakh. And there is also a wide variety of ethnic and religious mix. May I have the next slide, please? This is what the map of Jammu and Kashmir looks like. You can already see the amount of areas that are under different occupation and the terminology. Just keep clicking one at a time. The international border where the firing is taking place these days against the BSF is in this 199-kilometer area. This is that opposite Samba and that area. Then comes the line of control, which is about 740 kilometers. Somebody will tell you 742, somebody will say something else. 740 is good enough for ours. Thereafter, you come to this famous landmark called NJ9842, which is a map reference, which is the beginning of the area from where the Siachen region starts. And NJ9842 became famous only later. Actually, if you look back, the line of control was more or less the same line as the ceasefire line, which came into being after the UN-sponsored ceasefire came into effect, way back in 48, 49. In 71, there were some minor changes in this line because of attacks across this line by both sides. And with minor changes, that became the line of control after the Simla agreement. So when the two sides sat together and actually defined this line, that it joining this point to this point to this point to this point, they came up on the map reference of NJ9842, and beyond this, it's all glaciated. There's no one ever goes there, there are no people living there, there are no armed forces there, none. So they said, so-and-so to NJ9842, and thence to the north. Thence to the north was interpreted differently by the two sides. The Pakistanis interpreted it their way and we did our way. We'll talk about it later on when I come to Siachen. Then there is, of course, the line actual control, where the Chinese have occupied the Aksai Chin Plateau. Okay, next please. Very quickly, see the area. 60% area is Ladakh, but look at the population, 2%. Such a huge area, but the population is just 2%. That is why you will find that in any political dialogue that takes place within Kashmir, nobody even talks about Ladakh. Because they don't have number of seats in the Vidhan Sabha, you see, so they don't count. Same thing happens in Pakistan, where nobody talks about Balochistan, because very sparsely populated. Even if you win all seats in Balochistan, you still can't get a majority in their parliament, for whatever it is worth. So that is something that please make a note. And next one, please. That's right. Okay. I've purposely kept this. While you read this, just listen to what I'm saying. Because when we talk about the current situation, it will be of value to you. Everybody in Kashmir does not speak Kashmiri, right? Even within the valley, everybody doesn't speak Kashmiri. When you go to the border areas of the valley, which is as you know, the Srinagar Valley is surrounded by mountains on all sides. And when you go into those areas, the people living there will make it a point to tell you two things. One is, साहब हम कश्मीरी नहीं हैं, मतलब कश्मीरी ज़बान नहीं बोलते हैं, हम पहाड़ी हैं, पहाड़ी ज़बान बोलते हैं. So please note, that is what they tell you, one. Secondly, they will tell you कि आप जो वैली में लोग कहते हैं उसके ऊपर मत जाइए. यहाँ जब लड़ाई होती है तो हमारे घरों पर गोले बरसते हैं. और 1947 से लेके आज तक हमने जो भी जुल्म पाकिस्तान की तरफ से हुए हैं, हमने वो झेले. इसलिए हम समझते हैं कि आप जो काम कर रहे हो, आप मीनिंग द आर्मी, वो हमारे लिए कितना मायने रखता है. 47 से लेकर आज तक हमने आपकी मदद की है, आगे भी करते रहेंगे, क्योंकि आप हमारे घर को बचाने इधर आए हैं. That is something that they will make it a point to tell you, if not directly through conversation, but they will make these 2 points whenever you talk to them. So when you say Kashmiri, paint everybody with the same brush. There are others like Gujar, Bakarwals, who are the shepherd community, who live in the hills, always, either hills of the Kashmir Valley or hills in Jammu area. In winter they come down all the way with their flock of sheep and goats and cows. There are no buffaloes in the valley, by the way. There are only cows, buffaloes, bulls. They come back. Then there is a very small trickling of Sikhs who are in the valley, more Sikhs in the Jammu area. And of course, Ladakh is hugely Buddhist. But again, when you compare that to the population, the total numbers are not so high. Next one, please. I'm going to now run through a quick reminder of certain important dates. Next, please. I'm not going to talk about when was JKLF established, what happened, but some of these landmark events actually changed the course of history as far as we are concerned. Starting with, in 1984, the kidnapping and killing of Ravinder Mhatre, after whom Mhatre Bridge has been named. I don't know how many of you know that. The younger generation may not even know. The Mhatre Bridge is Ravinder Mhatre's name has been given there. He was an officer in our High Commission in London. He was kidnapped and he was going to be released by the JKLF, but because the British government started taking action, they panicked and they killed him. If they had waited for another 24 hours, they probably wouldn't have. But such is life. In 1989, the USSR, the then USSR withdrew from Afghanistan. That is when Brigadier Yusuf coined this thing of, 1,000 cuts and all that. That's when it happened. In 1989 also, JKLF started the insurgency in Kashmir. I mentioned in passing that JKLF started the ball rolling for Azadi. It was not for merger with Pakistan. They had a different agenda. They wanted pure and simple independence from both countries. Both countries didn't want it. लिहाजा JKLF की मौत हो गई. मतलब वो जिंदा तो थे but they were on life support. 94 में उन्होंने बड़ा एक उम्दा काम किया कि उन्होंने जाहिर किया कि हमने युद्ध विराम कर दिया है. There were no युद्ध going on anyway from their side because by then the Indian Army had stepped in 1992 and JKLF and its ilk had been pushed right into the corner. That's when the infiltration used to come up in huge numbers. 80 people, 100 people. Now you talk about infiltration bit 5 people, 6 people, 7 people. Those days, infiltration used to be in those kind of numbers. So all that is part of history now. The army called in 1992, started pushing people back, the Pakistanis and the Hizbul and everybody else. And the graph of insurgency started coming down very rapidly. So much so that out of a group of 10 infiltrators, just to give an example, earlier there used to be 2 Pakistanis or maybe 1 Pakistani and 9 local guys, Kashmiri boys. Started going down. So by 97, when they found that the local boys are not being, so then they started sending more of Pakistanis. So the percentage went up to as much as 40-50%. In a group of 10, 4 to 5 would be Pakistanis, 3-4 would be local, 1 or 2 will be guides, again local. Kargil War 1999, next. Then a very interesting thing took place in 2000. In July 2000, a man named Abdul Majid Dar declared unilateral ceasefire. He was the commander of Hizbul in the valley. He was Salahuddin's deputy. Salahuddin was the chief of, or is the chief of Hizbul, but he lives in Muzaffarabad, or so they say. In any case, he has no intentions of coming back. So that was a very, very important milestone. Actually, all our history, and with specific reference to Kashmir, is full of opportunities. And you'll find that if certain things had been done correctly while Hizbul, when Majid Dar had done this, and we had taken him under our wing, the whole history would have been quite different thereafter. But let's leave that alone. We didn't, we lost that opportunity. But another opportunity came in 2002 when extremely well-conducted elections to the State Assembly took place and Mr. Mufti Said became the Chief Minister. You found that thereafter the graph of insurgency kept coming down, 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 and from an estimate that we used to have way back in 2002 and 2003 of approximately 2,500 terrorists in the valley, it came down drastically to less than 1,000 during this period of 2002 to 2010. Today, it's less than 500. And those 500 are still, bulk of them are the outsiders, Lashkar, Jaish, and a small number of HM is still alive and kicking. The 2 or 3 other events which you're familiar with, 2010, stone pelting started as a change of tactics. Again, we didn't quite handle it well, so we were slightly on the back foot that time. Just as we were coming out of that situation, and again this year you found that things have gone back a bit, but this too shall pass. Don't worry, this is not the, ये चढ़ाव उतार जो हैं, ये कश्मीर में बहुत दफ़ा होते हैं, होएंगे, और हम उनके साथ डील करेंगे और सब ठीक होगा, कोई उसमें दिक्कत वाली बात नहीं है. Next. Let me come to a few issues which I must share with you. Please remove this perception that any Kashmiri, the moment you say Kashmiri, you have an image. The image is of a man wearing a firan, you know, that long coat, right? In winter, they don't put their hands through the sleeve. Hands are inside, holding the kangdi because it's so cold. And you feel that inside that firan he is holding an AK-47. Wrong. 99 of those firans don't hold an AK-47. 1% does, but that is because partly for a time militancy had become cottage industry in the manner that those guys just got hold of a AK-47 from somewhere and did local gundagardi, extortion and stuff. And I always used to call that as the Gabbar Singh syndrome. You know, when a young man, just out of his teens, and well, sort of educated, done his basic education, but all dressed up and nowhere to go, so he's on a loose end. So he wants to be, but you know, he wants to do something, he wants his identity, he wants to impress the girls. So what does he do? He becomes Gabbar Singh. वो अपने शर्ट के 2 बटन खोल के हाथ में AK-47 लेके घूमता है गांव के मेन बाजार में, and he just the local dada, okay? Burhan Wani was one of them. He was their poster boy, far more refined. He was not Gabbar Singh, but he was tech savvy. He was on, you know, things like Facebook and Twitter and all that he was familiar with. So he's the modern day Gabbar Singh, if you like, without the AK-47. But then all his pictures and videos with 47 and the camouflage were for being the poster boy that he was. Anyway, I'm not here to talk about Wani, so let's forget about him. On a basis of this, let's quickly run through what all happened from 97 onwards. Next one, please. In 1997, this is what I promised, sir, that I'll say. In 1997, when I went to the Kashmir Valley, in a notorious place called Kupwara, it's a beautiful place actually, but notorious because every time there is news about Kashmir, something or the other, किसी ने ग्रेनेड फेंका है, तो किसी ने कुछ किया है, या मचल सेक्टर में ये हुआ है, Kupwara dateline. So Kupwara is a much maligned sort of a place, and I can see already my friend here, who's your chief guest for the day, General Savarwal, he is smiling because we too have done exactly the same things. After I finished commanding the division in Kupwara, after Kargil war, I left. A few years later, he went and commanded the same division in the same Kupwara in the same situation, which had, of course, hopefully improved, and I take it that he didn't have the same kind of challenges as I did. And later on, when I finished command of the 15th Corps, few years later, Mukesh came and commanded 15th Corps. So we have a lot in common. And that's why I'm very happy that you have him here today, who will be talking to you a little later. 97, when I reached there, I went there after having already spent 2 tenures as a youngster, as a young captain, as a young major in the valley, when we used to float around on a scooter, go just about anywhere.
before coming on leave, and I was in a small place called Rampur, which is west of Baramulla. We used to just drive into an apple orchard, and they would say, "Sab, khud chun lo." We used to go and pack our own apples before coming on leave. That was the kind of relationship. When you drove past, any army convoy went past, little kids would wave to you and say, "Jai Hind." I went to Kashmir, having already known things have changed, but I went with that frame of mind. And what I saw was, not only that nobody was waving at you or saying Jai Hind, young people would look at you with a very angry stare, and being so impertinent, sometimes they would look the other side and spit. I said something has gone wrong drastically. This is not the Kashmir that I remember. This cannot be Kashmir. And I soon realized that their ears had been filled with venom. कानात विष ओतलं होतं आणि डोळ्यावर लाल रंगाचा चष्मा होता. लाल रंगाचा चष्मा लावल्यावर लालच दिसणार सगळं. No matter, till you remove it, you don't know what the reality is, right? You wear a red glass, red colored specs, everything is red. That was what was happening. So I kept thinking, and I said, how do I, while my men were doing a fantastic job of stopping infiltration, and we had, ये आज के हिसाब से firing तो कुछ भी नहीं है. This cross-border firing जो आज हो रहा है, this is about 10% of what we used to have from 97 to 99, right till the Kargil war and later. In my next tenure, also there was firing, but then ceasefire was announced and all that. But what I'm saying is they were doing a stupendous job, and I said, what can I do? I must win the battle of hearts and minds. And there was no way I could talk to people because they were already, given a different picture. Young people wouldn't talk to you. So I got hold of little children. And cut a long story short, I said, let them, there's no point in talking to them to say, Mera Bharat Mahan, ya, aap is Mahan mulk ke bashinde ho, ya ye ho, wo ho. I said, that's going to cut no ice with anyone. Let them themselves find out, is it really Mahan? Is it really that big? Is it such a country that we should be proud of? And I said, okay, let them form their own opinion. So I took young kids, aged between 8 and 14, and I started sending them to various parts of India under a project called Sangam. The Sangam was of the Kashmiri mainstream and the national mainstream. The Sangam was the confluence of these two Vaicharik mainstreams. That is why the name Sangam. It became such a roaring success that I was encouraged to repeat it. So there was Sangam 2, and I'm very happy to tell you, Sangam under various different names is continuing even today. कोई कहता उसको कि किसकी सैर बोलते हैं उसको आजकल मुकेश? What are the different names that these chaps are given? Anyway, by various names, that's not important. But Sangam was a roaring success. How it was a success was proved to me by one incident, and I'm going to take time to tell you about it. Because that incident really told me what the Kashmiri is all about. Remember, these children I had selected were the underprivileged ones, not those who lived in Kupwara. Kupwara was still civilized, there was electricity. These children were mostly from area close to the line of control, जिनके बाप ने डिस्ट्रिक्ट हेडक्वार्टर ऑफ कुपवारा भी नहीं देखा था, कईयों ने. आधे कम से कम ऐसे थे जिनके परिवार में किसी ने कुपवारा नहीं देखा था, और बहुत कम लोग थे जो श्रीनगर देख के आए थे या श्रीनगर तक जाके आए थे फॉर एनी वर्क और फॉर एजुकेशन और एनीथिंग. Or Delhi, my God, that was only in the books. Such were the kids. So I'm telling you this because I want you to appreciate where the kid is coming from, okay? When they came back, mind you, this trip, the first Sangam, was planned for 7 days with zero budget. Literally zero budget. I spoke to all my army friends and made arrangements for them to stay at various army locations along the way all the way from Srinagar to Delhi. Their transport was the returning army convoys. Whatever space was available, they would jump into that and come. Actually, what happened was, Farooq Abdullah came one day and he said, "Kya ho raha hai ye wo?" When he heard about this, he said, No. These boys must go and start. Let them go in buses. So J&K government gave me luxury buses. The kids traveled all the way from Srinagar to Jammu in those buses. Everywhere else, everywhere they were treated like VIPs. From 7 days, because of people's requests, कि यहाँ भी भेजो, वहाँ भी भेजो, राष्ट्रपति भवन में भेजो, करते करते 22 दिन का सफर हो गया. 22 days these kids were out. When they came back, they were walking cloud 9. Literally. When they went, none of them would look up at me and I would say कि आप जा रहे हो, ये होगा, वो होगा. You know, I was trying to pep them up कि आप बड़े अच्छे, आपका नसीब बड़ा अच्छा है और ये होगा, वो होगा, वहाँ देखेंगे, ये देखेंगे, दिल्ली देखोगे. आप रमज़ान month was on, so I said, आप दिल्ली की जो जामा मस्जिद है वहाँ जाके नमाज अदा करोगे. आपके बाप दादाओं ने किसी ने किया हुआ है? हज तो बहुत दूर की बात है, लेकिन जामा मस्जिद की भी नमाज किसी ने पढ़ी होगी? नहीं, किसी ने नहीं पढ़ी. And they won't look up, they won't talk, they would keep looking down and say, हाँ जनाब, ना जनाब. When they came back, all of them wanted to talk to me at the same time. Such a ruckus, because their confidence level had gone from 0 to 100 in those 22 days. So I said, before you leave, I want you to take one leaf out of an exercise book. I didn't want them to take a foolscap paper because they would have written essays. I wanted what is coming straight from the heart. What have you got from this trip? ये वहीचा कागद असतो ना आपल्या, त्यांना सगळ्यांना एक एक कागद फाड़ून दिला. अभी आप लिखिए, 10 मिनट आपके पास है, योर टाइम स्टार्ट्स नाउ. बस बाहर वेट कर रही है, आपने अपने घर जाना है. So they wrote quickly because now they wanted to get home. In the evening, I got that big gatta in my room, started reading. Normal, हम आर्मी के बहुत शुक्रगुजार हैं, आर्मी तो ये तो फरिश्ते हैं, ये है वो है, ये usual Kashmiri praise. You have to take 50% off straight away, you know. But that's okay. That was part of their style. 2 boys, what they wrote went straight here. One boy wrote, and this has a background. When they went to Delhi, they were taken to. Can I take a little more time? Is it possible? How long do I have? 10. Okay. When they went to Delhi, they went to Rajghat. किसी ने बोला कि ये महात्मा गांधी जी की समाधि है, तो उन्होंने पूछा ये लिखा क्या है? They can't read Devanagari, you see. It was not in Urdu, Hey Ram. So somebody explained to them कि ये Hey Ram का मतलब ये है वगैरह वगैरह. सुन लिया. फिर वो आते वक्त उधमपुर में रुके. उधमपुर में आर्मी का एक बहुत अच्छा वॉर मेमोरियल है, जिस पर सब उन शहीदों के नाम हैं जिन्होंने सन 47 onwards, everybody's name who's been martyred in J&K is on that wall. Okay? These 2 boys, and they said ये किनके नाम हैं? तो उनको बताया गया कि भाई ये जो अपने वतन के ऊपर कुर्बान हो गए ऐसे सिपाहियों के नाम हैं. ठीक है, सुन लिया. तो ये जो 2 लड़के थे, एक ने क्या लिखा आपको पता है? एक ने लिखा, and this is a kid coming from an area where his father hasn't been to Srinagar. He says, मुझे इंडिया का दूसरा गांधी बनना है. Can you imagine? This 10-year-old kid wants to be India's second Gandhi. I had tears in my eyes. The second one said, एक दिन मेरा नाम उस दीवार पर सुनहरे अक्षरों में लिखा. I said, I must be doing something right. Anyway, we continued that spirit. Maitri was an opposite. I called kids from all over India to come and spend time with their Kashmiri counterparts. Maitri 1 was a very small group of 50. People came from all over, as far as Sikkim and few people from Pondicherry and so on. Maitri 2 was massive. Maitri 2 was again, children from all over India came, as far as Andaman Nicobar. 500 children. Out of that, 350 were from outside, 150 from the 3 regions of Kashmir. 50 each. 50 Ladakhis, 50 Kashmiri Valley boys and girls, and 50 from the Jammu region. At the end of 15 days, they didn't want to go back. I got a long application saying, can this Maitri not be extended by 1 more week? Fantastic. What I'm saying is that when you reach out to people, they're still very clear-hearted. Nobody wants to go anywhere away from India. Take that as the sentiment. And this sentiment, one last story. That story, please remind me, I'll tell you in the question answers, because I have to cover some more ground. We started various things. In Kargil war, again, people thought, oh, these people will now take advantage of the fact that we are fighting on the border, and there will be a lot of hangama in the rear areas. They will blow up bridges, and they'll do this, and they'll do that. Not one thing happened. Not one thing. I had actually redeployed the Rashtriya Rifle battalions and some regular troops to protect lines of control, because I said there's no point in having our ammunition convoy ambushed or whatever, petrol and lubricants convoy ambushed. So very heavy. Within the first 4 days, lifted all of them, sent them up. Because not one incident. And people used to in fact come and say, कि साहब, बताइए हम क्या कर सकते हैं? In 1999, just imagine. So sentiment was in the countryside is definitely different from what it is in Lal Chowk, in Anantnag, in Pulwama, in Sopur, or in Baramulla. Those are urban areas. They're highly politicized. They have no basic problems of bijli, pani, makan. गांव में जाके देखो तो कितना प्रॉब्लम है. We also started a milk cooperative, thanks to Amul. I made a trip to Amul, took Mr. Mufti Saeed along with me. We set up 2 dairies with the help of Dr. Varghese, Korean, and we set up one in Jammu and one in Srinagar. Next one, please. Very quickly, just want to show you the map of Siachen. Next one. Why we should never give up Siachen. Never. Just look at NJ 9842. Is there a pointer somewhere here? But in any case, I'm sure you can see this. That dotted line represents the Pakistani interpretation, which goes straight to Karakoram Pass, which is with us. Ours follows the accepted international principle of watershed. So our line goes along the Saltoro Ridge. We are holding those heights, and we will continue to hold those heights. There's no way we should or even dream of leaving those areas. There are many reasons for it. I'll cover one more reason a little later. But west of that line, a lot of things are happening, including the CPEC that you mentioned, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor and so on. Under the garb of that, there are Chinese troops in that area. They're all come there as workers, as engineering, consultants and so on. They're all Chinese People's Liberation Army guys. Next. J&K, as you know, is the main source of water to Pakistan. So I'm coming back after the whole Ram Kahani back to Pakistan. And I have precisely, I think, 6 minutes or 4.5 minutes or thereabout. So I'll quickly run through this. The next conflict may be based or will arise out of a water-based conflict or a water-based situation. The reason is very simple. Pakistan is an agrarian country. It's a country which is, both the provinces, Sindh and Punjab, are highly agro-based, highly feudal. There are people who hold 400 acres is quite common. 1,000 acres is a chap who's truly rich. So such people, for their land, they need water. And what is happening is, even through the Indus Water Treaty, whatever water goes down the Indus and other rivers, Punjab, I'm talking about the Pakistani Punjab, which is 3 times larger than our Punjab, they hog all the water. What goes to Sindh is a trickle. So there is feud between the two of them, like our two states, I don't want to name them. The same problem, water problem, कि तुम लोग ज़्यादा दे वहाँ लेते हो अपर राइपेरियन होने की वजह से हमको नहीं मिलता है वगैरह वगैरह. And they found a common person to say, नहीं वो इंडिया से कम आता है ना, इसकी वजह से हम आपको कहाँ से देंगे. So ultimately the thing that albatross comes around India's neck, right? So that might be one possible cause of the next conflict. So it's important. China, in any case, I think enough has been said. Let me not repeat whatever has been said earlier. And I'm grateful that you mentioned it far more effectively than I can possibly. I was talking about the presence of Chinese troops in that area west of Siachen, the line that we are holding. Not only are they constructing the road all the way, you see that famous Karakoram highway doesn't go through Karakoram Pass, by the way. It's called Karakoram Highway because it goes through the Karakoram ranges, right? It starts from Kashgar in China, goes all the way down up to a place called Abdal something, I forget the name now. It's in Sindh, Pakistan. And that is now being developed as the economic corridor. In the process, when it passes west of the line, Gilgit and Skardu, both these are now being linked to the economic corridor by a 4-lane highway, which is also being constructed by the Chinese. And look at this, how beautifully the Chinese have fooled the Pakistanis. When their president, Jinping came and said, 48 billion, how much was it? 46 billion. Aid to Pakistan. Pakistan was climbing cloud 9 and trying to reach cloud 10. Little did they realize that 44 of those billions will go back to China because their companies will construct all this. And the workers will be there, not local. So 44 will come from this pocket, 46 will come out of this pocket, 44 will go into this pocket, 2 billion small change will get dispersed among the netas of Pakistan, and nothing will come on the ground. So don't let that disturb you, but the Chinese will do a good job of this corridor. So infrastructure-wise, they will benefit. And once that 4-laning up to Skardu is done, that means trouble for us. Because the deployment into that area can be far more rapid and far more heavier than thus far. Don't be taken in by this so-called rift between the Pakistani political leadership and the army. It's a smoke screen. Well, it's a reality. It has taken place, but this has happened before. And it is nothing that the Pakistani army is losing sleep over. They say, इनको तो हम देख लेंगे. See, the Pakistani army has actually virtual control of that. You know, famously it is said that most countries have an army. Pakistan army has a country. Because they completely own that country. They completely own that country. The Fauji Foundation actually controls most of the businesses in Pakistan. The Fauji Foundation. All ex-servicemen. Their ex-servicemen have done so much for their leadership. All this area of Muzaffarabad and down in the POK area which I showed you, they're no longer the Muzaffarabadis and the local Pahadis anymore. Highest percentage is of ex-Pakistan Army Punjabi Muslims who've been brought there, given land, settled. Just like the Hanization of it by China. Like the Chinese brought the Huns to outdo the locals and at one stage almost become the majority, which is what their long-term plans are. Exactly the same thing Pakistan did here. So these are difficult areas, but we have an enemy who's never to be trusted. Never take them for their. They are the most ghatak people going around, particularly the army. I'm talking about the army. You see, politicians believe in the art of the possible. वो coalition बनाते हैं, इनके साथ मेल मिलाप करके गवर्नमेंट खड़ी करते हैं. आज के जो दोस्त हैं वो कल के दुश्मन हो जाते हैं. In politics all ये चलता रहेगा. But the army doesn't believe in all this. उनके लिए तो एक ही मकसद है पाकिस्तान को जकड़ में रखना है. And they will never leave that home. You must have heard about that famous thing when two Pakistani corps commanders were discussing over a cup of tea. They had come to Rawalpindi for a conference with the Chief of Army Staff. So during the tea break, they were discussing कि अरे वो F-16 का जो मसला है ना, तो he said हाँ यार बड़ा अच्छा प्लॉट है, कॉर्नर प्लॉट है वो. So he said नहीं वो कॉर्नर प्लॉट की बात नहीं कर रहा हूँ मैं. They are so much into real estate that other guy thought here's some lucrative corner plot to be bought somewhere in Islamabad or Lahore or in Sialkot or somewhere. Whereas the other guy was trying to tell him how the Americans are blocking the sale of F-16 aircraft. Anyway, so such is the state of our enemy across. We got to be vigilant. We got to be tough. That's the only thing that army understands. Done. And in Kupwara, we gave them that plentiful. 1 minute agar main लूँ और one just to lighten the mood a little bit, because I think ये बहुत serious हो गए हैं लोग. We used to monitor Pakistani transmissions in Kupwara because that time used to be so much firing, in thousands actually. Hundreds of artillery shells, thousands of MMG belts and so on and so forth, mortars. So we used to monitor the transmission to figure out what is happening. Is our fire effective or not? The one order that had been given by me to my troops was, कि देखो, if you go to be guilty, please be guilty of commission and not omission. मतलब ये है कि अगर ज़्यादा करोगे और ज़्यादा करोगे तो मैं कहूँगा कि इतना ज़्यादा क्यों मारा है भाई, लेकिन अगर आपने मारा ही नहीं है तो फिर मैं आपको मारूँगा. The idea was that they opened a rifle fire, you should reply with a light machine gun fire, a light machine gun fire to be replied by a medium machine gun fire, a medium machine gun fire to be replied by infantry mortars, and infantry mortars to be replied by artillery, which I will do. I said, this is escalation, which you can't control, leave it to me. And therefore, the transmission went as follows. Subedar Saab from the picket was talking to his Major Saab down below at the base. And they're speaking in Punjabi. Pardon my faulty Punjabi, but this is how the conversation went. He says, Saab ji, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਪੰਗੇ ਬੰਦ ਹੋ ਇਹ ਜੋ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਇਹ ਬੰਦੇ ਬੜੇ ਪਾਗਲ ਹੈ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਪੰਗੇ ਲੋਗੇ तो साड़ी लाशें जाएंगी यहाँ से बस और कुछ नहीं. I was very happy. The guy says these guys are mad. They will hit us so hard that you'll have to evacuate our bodies. So don't take पंगा with these guys. I said damn good. अगर यही दुश्मन आपके बारे में सोचता है तो और क्या चाहिए. Thank you. जय हिंद.